I'm Stuart Yasgur, and this is Economic Architecture, the podcast.
So we're the first locality in the country doing this pre-disaster. We haven't had that major storm, that the Katrina or the Sandy, where Congress just sends in billions of dollars to rebuild. We're doing this prior to that. It makes it a little bit challenging sometimes because we haven't had a Cat 3 storm hit us. And pretty much every year there's a % chance it could happen. So we just are trying to get ahead of that and show a new model of doing these things.
Norfolk is a city in Virginia that we call a living laboratory. It's a place where the development and implementation of new innovations have real potential to improve resiliency in the face of climate-related disasters. Norfolk is at the frontier of designing and thinking through infrastructure innovations that protect against future major weather-related events. These innovations create the necessary protections that can help mitigate the potential damage to vulnerable communities near the coastlines. This week, I had the privilege to speak with Kyle Spencer, an innovator from the City of Norfolk.
I'm the Chief Resilience Officer for the city. What we thought about was densifying development and moving towards the interior of the city where it's a little bit higher ground or much higher ground in some cases, and concentrating folks there. But it takes a long time to move a city, if you will.
Norfolk is a region that's come up many times on the podcast. But why I think this conversation is particularly notable is that Kyle's innovations are sensible, clear, practical approaches to solving a problem. In some ways, his work is so profoundly sensible, it's provocative. One of the things that's really interesting is that they recognize that when the large-scale solutions that they're putting in place today come online, that will create protections for the city for 50, 70 years. Kyle and his team are clear-eyed about the challenges that climate change is presenting to the region. They're taking action to address the problems of tomorrow, but they also recognize that if Norfolk is going to be a viable and thriving city 100 years from now, that they're going to have to use that time to start addressing some of the fundamental issues that they face.
It really started with ours back about almost 10 years ago now with the Rockefeller Foundation's 100 Resilient Cities Initiative. They identified 100 cities around the world as resilient. We were one of the first 33. We were the third city in the world to appoint the position, which they helped support for the first couple of years to get it going. But then it's now part of our general fund, budget, and it's grown quite a bit from 1 or 2 people now to about 10 people. So Norfolk, we're an old city, and over time, we've developed and redeveloped ourselves, and with that has come with some unintended consequences. And primarily that's due to the way we live in these old creeks and reclaimed land historically has created a lot of flooding challenges. Also has created some concentrated pockets of poverty and disconnected some neighborhoods. We're working towards trying to solve those kinds of problems using projects that have these multiple layers of benefits and solutions to them. And at the same time, we're for innovation. So we're very much trying to be at the front of whether it's a technology innovation or a best practice in planning. We see ourselves as like a living laboratory to help figure these things out. And hopefully folks can learn from our experience.
It's really distinctive geography, right? You have coast, you have rivers, you're in a very specific kind of land area. Can you help just paint a picture for people?
So we sit at the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay near the Atlantic Ocean, and we have these natural deep water ports that are really what brought Norfolk to be historically. We're a big port city, so we have the third largest port on the East Coast. We have the largest Navy station in the world. We also have the only NATO headquarters in America here, and we're surrounded really on 3 sides by water. We actually have a 7.5 miles of beach that face the Chesapeake Bay. It's not the beach that you see at the ocean like you would in Virginia Beach or somewhere in Miami. It's a nice, calm beach that still faces a lot of challenges, of course. So that's on the north end of the city. And then lots of creeks and rivers, like you said, coastal plain kind of environment that reach way up into the city. And like I said, historically, some of those have been filled in and stormwater pipes and things like that have been put in place instead of those natural systems. And those tend to be problem areas for us for flooding. It seems like the water has a memory to it and it wants to go back to those old places. And a lot of those places historically weren't filled in with an engineered type of fill you would do today, 1700s. And so those lands are settling much quicker than the natural ground around them. And so that's where the flooding is, where we filled, is what we say. A lot of cities and localities up and down the East Coast were developed in a similar way. We've been here about 400 years, so a lot of that's happened in our history. I would say about 15%. I think the last time I looked at it, of our city is that reclaimed land, which also happens to be about the percentage of our floodplain. The water is a huge asset for us, but it also can be a threat that we're trying to adapt to and manage as things change around us.
In the United States, a city going back to the 1600s, this is a very old city from the U.S. perspective.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And a lot of our infrastructure is old. You can see these sort of things stacking on top of themselves that we're trying to fix. And we're seeing as we do projects, we're finding pipes made out of terracotta, sometimes carved out wood. I think one of the things that we're really proud of is just trying to think about how to live with water. And we started that exercise with the Dutch dialogues. We just celebrated our 10-year anniversary of that a couple of weeks ago. And so we brought in these Dutch experts and people from New Orleans and places that are a little bit farther along to learn from them about how do you adapt to rising seas and these sorts of things, more rainfall. That really gave us a sort of a kickstart or a jump start into this resilient space on what to do. And our first real project example was the National Disaster Resilience Competition that Housing and Urban Development put on in 2000. We were awarded in 2016. We got the largest single grant that we've ever received for the city back then, and that was $112 million. And that was to implement a comprehensive flood management project. It's not just a flood protection system. It has amenities built in to help strengthen the community, provide social cohesion, and really environmental justice. With that grant, we helped create a nonprofit to work on resilience innovation and bring solutions to problems that we just can't solve with our day-to-day kind of work.
Interesting. So this is the first time I've ever heard about pipes made out of carved out wood. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, like a hollow tree, basically.
That's remarkable. And I should say we have had a chance to talk to Paul Robinson.
Right. Yeah, so ours is that nonprofit, and I have worked together ever since the beginning. So the idea is these cities buy a lot of stuff, and we've shown that this model does work. And it's very unique because we're using HUD money, a federal agency that typically doesn't do this type of innovation. And luckily the state came in and added some money on top of that. And so Paul and his team have put out many challenges now and come up with lots of great solutions for places like us to tap into if we choose. And it's great because we don't have to really do much on the front end. They broker all the relationships. They help fund these companies to get them started on these ideas. It just takes a little bit of my meeting time, like time to sit down and talk to them. We'll share our data with these companies so they can have all the resources they need to develop a solution that does work for a city like ours.
I do think that this is an incredible example. And just to play it back to you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is HUD post Sandy, massive hurricane, huge impact on the eastern seacoast. HUD says, okay, we need some kind of innovation. They have this huge challenge. Step forward and say, we have an idea for what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Mobilize a huge grant. So now you have federal government, you have the city government, you also have the state adding to funds there.
Yep.
And then you're going ahead and creating a nonprofit that can anchor kind of innovation and attract and fund small for-profit companies that create employment
Right.
and businesses and et cetera. And then you go ahead and work with them through your procurement process to actually implement some of the solutions that they're generating.
We call them challenges, but it's hard for a city to be innovative that way, to provide seed money. RISE does all that. If we see a solution is viable, we will sign on to see it through. In one case with FloodMap, we said, look, we want to buy this product now. What was neat was because we went through this competitive challenge process with RISE, we were able to justify a sole source procurement for it and fast track it into our program or into our regular budget and pay for this. And since then, that company's been able to expand into other localities because now they have an example they can point to.
And it does give people concrete understanding of what you mean when you say it's a living laboratory, right? This is a problem, a new solution coming up, then moving forward with that solution, actually implementing it.
Yeah, if it's not technology, in this case, that was a technology solution. But if you have a widget, a way to maybe build green infrastructure better, then we will find you a place on our streetscape or in our city to dig up and put it, and let's see it in action. and watch it for a little while and just help these companies get through all those steps, maybe a little bit easier than just coming off the street blindly. It doesn't take a huge amount of time and effort on our end, but we see a huge return on that because of these neat and innovative solutions.
That's really interesting. So that's for folks who have innovative companies or working on technology or different solutions. Potentially, you should be on their radar as a place where they can actually help bring their solutions to fruition at an accelerated pace.
Yeah, as long as it's tackling these resilience problems, doesn't have to be flooding necessarily. It could be energy. We've done stuff with insurance. That's exactly what we mean by that living laboratory.
That's fantastic. Walk us through a little bit about what you're doing with the Army Corps of Engineers. What does that project look like if we were to see it?
Yeah, well, it starts out as a feasibility study where they look to see if there's a federal interest in investing in coastal flood protection. In our case, that looks like flood walls, levees, if there's space on the ground. Again, we're very built out, about 95%, so we don't have a ton of open space to put a levee, but flood walls, pump stations, some nature-based solutions to help mitigate impacts and also knock down waves and all these sorts of things. A good portion of it is home raising and basement filling. So it's really a system of systems that all have to work together in sync. And so we started that again around 2016 and got it authorized by Congress and the Water Resource Development Act of 2020. And then the IIJA, the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act, provided $400 million of federal dollars to start it into construction and design. And it's a 65% federal, 35% non-federal cost share. Hopefully in a few years from now, you'll see some of these structures have been built. A lot of times they're following the edge of our shoreline and coincide with maybe a walking trail up on top of it. We're looking at public art along it as well. We're trying to integrate it into the urban fabric of our city, especially downtown. There's other places where we're going to build large surge barriers out in the water, much like you see in Holland or some other places in Europe. There's a few of these in the US. They built some in New Orleans after Katrina. And these are just big gates that are always open, but they'll close ahead of a storm and hold back that storm surge from inundating the city and flooding everything and really catastrophic level flooding. So these are quite large pieces of infrastructure. They're providing that protection and preservation of our city and all the assets, really mission readiness for the Navy and the Corps and all these kinds of things, supporting their goals as well on just being able to operate right after a storm event. You're not operating during a hurricane necessarily, but you want to go back to business as quick as possible. And that's what this is about, is looking at that big picture and large scale events.
That's amazing. So you're talking about large surge gates around Norfolk that are going to be out off the coast. Is this protecting the city itself?
You know, the mouth of the creeks and rivers in Norfolk. So the way these programs are authorized, they're only, authorized typically by locality, because you have to have the administrative sort of pieces worked out to manage the program and operate and maintain it. And so we're independent cities in Virginia. It's just a little bit complicated to do that. Hurricane Sandy, again, was the triggering event that started this program. We had enough unmet need here. So we're the first locality in the country doing this pre-disaster. We haven't had that major storm, that the Katrina or the Sandy, where Congress just sends in billions of dollars to rebuild. We're doing this prior to that. It makes it a little bit challenging sometimes because we haven't had a Cat 3 storm hit us. And pretty much every year there's a percent chance it could happen. So we just are trying to get ahead of that and show a new model of doing these things with the Army Corps. The Army Corps historically does these feasibility studies. They sit on the shelf. When a storm hits, they dust it off. And again, they get all this money, they implement it. We're doing it a different way. And we're trying to show like this is the right way. And the Army Corps should do this more outside of Norfolk, right? Get ahead of the game. That's the right thing to do. Because we see a huge return on that investment. Resilience investment is recent studies we've seen. It's every dollar you spend, you get about $13 back. So that makes a lot of sense to us, right? It should to most people.
That is incredible. You have not yet experienced the storm that you're anticipating, but all
Right.
the models say this storm is coming. It's a matter of when, not if. And you created enough kind of political will to say, okay, let's act in advance of this coming to actually put the protections in place. Because otherwise, without these kind of surge gates, all those rivers and creeks they become the conduits through which this water
Oh,
can surge through communities and destroy homes. And so by putting these gates up, you're creating that protection in advance of this occurring. After an event happens, people say, why didn't we do this before? But this is really an example of a community stepping forward and saying, let's do this before. The economics are there, the science is there. It's feasible for us to do it. It just takes hard work to build the support and keep everybody focused on what's really important. And here's an example of you're doing that hard work.
right. Yeah, it's not cheap. It does come at a cost that is significant. And so with that, we can't do it alone. So we're building relationships and partnerships at the state level. The non-federal match doesn't mean local. It can be state dollars. It can be really anything that's not a federal dollar. So we're looking and working with the current administration at the state, the incoming administration. And flooding is a very bipartisan or nonpartisan issue. Our goal, is to get some of this done before we get one of those storms. Like the first constructible feature will probably be this pump station it's out to bid. Like we're starting the procurement of, it's going to be a design build. So we would probably be in construction in early 27 with that, right about the same time or right after the flood wall that goes with it. It's a hybrid flood wall levee right there and near our downtown area. We'll start with the construction in 2027, let's say. It'll take 2 or 3 years, depending on what feature we're talking about, to finish those constructible features. It just depends on how much funding we can bring in, right? So we have the 400 federal currently. We match that with 35%. So we got about $600 million right now to get quite a bit done. As we show progress, we can ask for more through the budgetary processes at the federal, state, and local levels. So it'll start being more funding dependent on the schedule because we'll probably have most of it designed a few years from now, and then it'll just be ready for construction when the funding is available. It's about $3 billion. It's 2.6 in 2023 dollars. We're expecting that to go up some, and we're working on those new numbers. Everything seems to go up, right, over time. So we're expecting it to go up for sure. But the faster we can do this, the cheaper it will be. Just the time value of money kind of issue. So we're just pressing hard again to do it as soon as possible so that it helps with that issue.
I think one of the other things that's remarkable about this is, unfortunately, it's a little bit fashionable to point fingers at government and things not being able to move forward because of regulations and regulatory pieces that have been put in place to protect communities, environment, et cetera. And certainly there are examples where things have not gone forward that should have gone forward. But on the other side of it, there's also examples like this of things really moving forward in impressive ways at large scale that are not receiving the attention and awareness that they probably should. I think this is a wonderful kind of counterpoint example to so many of those kind of common conversations.
Yeah, I mean, that's how we see it as well, especially when it's about storytelling and connecting these dots of the military, largest Navy base in the world. We have the regional trauma center in Norfolk. We have the downtown sort of business core of our region. And so when you put this all together, it just makes a lot of sense to get at it as soon as possible and try to avoid some catastrophic thing happening. So
that's remarkable. But even as big as this is, it's not the only thing you're working on.
This project stops at the coast. It's a coastal storm risk management program. There's a lot of interior drainage work. Again, we have these old pipes. They're way too small. So we've been doing a lot of analysis over the years to look at where things need to be improved on the stormwater side. We've identified at least $1 billion of projects there. Now we have a stormwater department in public works, but we work really closely with them because these all work together, these systems. So there's some other programs we're doing with even the Department of Defense, or I guess the Department of War now. They have a program that does have funding available to sprinkle outside the fence to help make a locality more resilient. That's called the Defense Community Infrastructure Program. It's a grant program. We've gotten some grant funding for that. And that's like raising some roads and doing some of these backflow preventers in our stormwater pipes. We're also doing a lot of trying to teach people to strengthen their own resilience muscles. So what can you do on your property, right? So retain your rain, capture rainfall where it lands, soak it up as best you can before you release it to the system. And if you release it slowly so that we can handle it. And so if everybody does it a little bit, then it really helps alleviate the toll on the whole system. And so we have a little mini grant we offer twice a year to like churches and nonprofits. But we have a pattern book with 10 home projects that you can look at rain garden, like how to do a rain garden, how to do a rain barrel, how to do pervious pavers, and There's a whole plant menu because planting a tree is great, right? Like it doesn't have to be a big project. We have a nutritional equity fund that we helped get created in the city budget that we can offer grants to folks trying to help serve folks that are underfed. We did a similar thing with banking called Bank On, which is it's a national program, but we started it in Norfolk here in our office that helps people with financial literacy and just learning about getting a bank account and saving. And so there was like match savings involved that we partnered with banks that would bring that funding in. We're really looking now as way into the future at insurance. So once these systems are built, these big flood control systems, we don't necessarily want people to drop their flood insurance. We actually have a very high uptake in flood insurance. About 80% of the people that should have flood insurance that are in the floodplain do have it in our city. That's very high. Usually it's 30 to 50%. So we want to maintain that because there is always a storm or a situation we can't protect against. You think of Hurricane Harvey is 30 inches of rain. Well, no stormwater system is made. So you could flood from a different source, and we want you to keep that insurance. But maybe there's something we can do, maybe a community-based policy. So we make your premiums as low as possible, raise your deductible, obviously, but we will create a community policy. This is what we've been looking into that could pay that deductible. So you stay in your home, you get your deductible paid as quickly as you can so that we can get to work on fixing things back. And so we've been working with some of our folks like Rise and some of the reinsurance groups to look at what does that look like in our city. And we have a few places we can test this idea and model it. So that's something we've been doing actually this past summer with Resilient Cities Network helped us through a partnership program they offer for free. So that Resilient Cities Network, that is what the Rockefeller Foundation's 100 Resilient Cities used to be, is really great because it connects all of us cities, especially here in North America, together. And we just had our monthly call a few minutes ago. We're able to do this knowledge exchange. We share resources all the time, strategies.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting aspect of this, right? Even this community-based insurance product that you're mentioning, it's certainly something we've seen a need for in other communities, and other people are starting to wrestle with this of, okay, insurance costs are so high for folks. You want to make sure that they maintain the insurance. One way to make it affordable could be increasing that deductible, but then maybe there's a community-based approach to pay that deductible so that people aren't left exposed if they need that insurance product. And the fact that you're exploring this in your living laboratory there, but then also sharing it to other cities that are also on the cusp of trying to figure out some of these problems.
Yeah, New York and Miami has done a pilot similar to this. And that's what we're trying to do maybe here, but it's been a little bit different. Maybe it's parametric based or something like that, but which is what New York did. But what we're worried about is when this thing is built, this big project, stop the catastrophic flooding, is FEMA may remap our flood zone. And they may map a lot of the city out of the flood zone. And people are like, I don't need flood insurance anymore. It's like mentality shift. And so there's this, no, your insurance, you keep it because it'll be way cheaper. Just keep it because you might need that. And then we'll help figure this out, perhaps, especially for the folks that need it the most. There's definitely neighborhoods that can maybe handle that themselves, but we have the highest concentration of low income people in the region. And so we're really keen on trying to help them and start our focus. And really that's the flood wall that we're starting. This first piece is actually for some of those marginalized communities and work our way around to some of the more affluent communities because they have cars, they can get out of town, they can take care of themselves a little bit better. So let's just focus our energy right now in some of those other areas that don't have the resources, and we'll get the whole thing done.
As people are listening to this and they're starting to see that Norfolk is a city in this regard is really on a leading edge, right, of how cities are thinking about these things and tackling the challenges that we're experiencing today and are going to be growing for all of us. They could see where you're pushing today, but also in a way you're describing the future of what other cities start to look like. What does the future of Norfolk start to look like?
We're a Dillon rule state, which means the state provides the authority to the localities of what they can and can't regulate. And one of the things they let us do is our zoning ordinances and land use. We wrote in 2018 one of the most resilient, or probably the most resilient zoning code in the country that doesn't allow slab on grade anymore. Doesn't allow certain types of development in certain areas, or you have to get a quotient, you have a scoring criteria. Around that same time, we did a thing called Vision 2100, where we said, what do we look like basically 100 years from now relative to sea level rise and things like that we're anticipating. there are places that we're going to have to stay away from. And so what we thought about was densifying development and moving towards the interior of the city where it's a little bit higher ground or much higher ground in some cases, and concentrating folks there. But it takes a long time to like move a city, if you will. And so that's why I think of as like of time scales, right? So it's going to take me a decade or more to build the coastal protection. In the meantime, I got Rise helping me come up with new things. We can help you get around the city with the Waze app and flooding in real time. And those tools help us have time to build a big project. And then that big project, they're typically designed to last 50, 75 years. Will give us some time to figure out how we do the next thing, which is maybe migrate or move away strategically from the edge, from the coast. What Vision 2100 was about was thinking about what that future city looks like. What areas would we gradually over time change how we develop or redevelop? And so with this project now that it's a real going to construction, we've really got more time to sort that out and figure it out a lot better. And I think that hopefully that helps give people a little bit of ease. Oh, okay, you're not going to move me out of my house that has this great view of the water anytime soon because I'm protected for a while. My kids will be protected for a while. And over time, we'll figure out how we move away from that part of the city into this more safer and probably more dense development to support that.
You're describing a very kind of intentional and thoughtful approach to creating a viable and vibrant Norfolk over decades into the 100-year kind of time horizon. I don't think that's not often the tenor of the conversation about living with as the climate is changing and extreme weather is becoming more common and more severe. Mm-hmm. But it helps people recognize how we can be active with regard to it and be intentional and thoughtful about how we're charting a course forward. How widespread is this kind of orientation? Do you feel like you have a large number of peers who share this kind of orientation? It's just further removed from the public conversation, or is this still a relatively smaller group of people in resilient cities, for example, across the country?
Yeah, I think especially the Eastern Coast, even in Hampton Roads. I mean, when we did the Dutch dialogues, it wasn't just the Norfolk Dutch dialogues. We had the city of Hampton, which is right across the river from us. And even in this last 10-year celebration we did a few weeks ago, we looked more broadly at the region. So I think definitely in parts of the coastal plain here in Virginia that are tracking this or looking into this, there's definitely some nonprofits that are helping folks understand things like the legalities of it all and how stewardship of the land looks in the future, right? Yeah, there may be a loss of tax base, but you may be able to make up for it over here. But who's taking care of this? That's a burden on the city. So maybe there's folks that can step in. It's not a common conversation, a regular one, so to speak, but it is coming up quite a bit with the region here and places like Charleston, places like Miami. Like we all talk to each other. A lot of us are in these same, like the Army Corps programs, and we want to learn from each other. Say with the Army Corps, where you're doing home elevations and basement filling, and there could be buyouts, right? So there could be other tools in that toolbox you could use. And those are maybe funded differently than another federal program like FEMA, where the owner has to pay a certain amount or to raise their house. This program is a little bit different. It's 100% paid for. Maybe it's a better way to do it. It doesn't mean we would stop doing the FEMA program because certain parts of the city, we won't be able to close the gates for every little minor event, but there may be low-lying areas that are susceptible to flooding that we still may need to tackle for those scenarios.
And so let me ask you a question that goes in a totally different direction, but you're an individual. You live along coastline, along creek, along river, someplace where these kind of issues might be manifest. What can an individual do to take action tomorrow?
Yeah, there's a lot of programs that actually can help you stabilize your shoreline or provide funding assistance, technical assistance if you need it, depending on if you're a homeowner or a business. We just encourage people to reach out to us. We're happy to help connect you to either the right city department or group that can help you sort this out. But I think folks need to start looking at start to get used to the idea that what it is today is going to be different in the future. Change is hard, and it's always that's a hard conversation a lot of times. Look at what other folks are doing and learning from them and be willing to just try something a little bit different. We hear a lot about, I just want a bulkhead. I want to make my shoreline hard, hold back that water. And that's actually maybe not the best solution. It needs to be more of a living shoreline. It's really about educating yourself or helping educate them. And so we do a lot of outreach. So come out to those events. We have a giant map of our city that goes on the floor and you can walk on it. It's 25 by 25 feet. You can come to these events where we walk you around, talk about what you can do. And then we have all the city departments in the room. So if you're like, I want to figure out what kind of trees I should plant, there's the tree guy, or there's the stormwater department, or if you don't know your evacuation zone, emergency management, he's right here. And being really thoughtful about how we engage with the public and not just, I don't know that answer, you have to call 311. We're trying to bring it all to you where you're at and hopefully get an answer right then and there if we can. That's our main goal. Something we should have been doing probably a long time ago. And we've gotten great feedback on that.
I said, if we're going to tell people that they should reach out to you, we got to tell them how. What's the best way for people to reach out to you or to your office?
Yes, we have a website called norfolk.gov, but resilientnorfolk.com is a great place to learn more about the Army Corps project. You can sign up for newsletters there. You can reach out to us to come talk to your organization. So we go to civic leagues, we go to churches, we go to any group really that asks. Basically, Norfolk RC, it stands for Norfolk Resilient City. Norfolk RC at norfolk.gov is a sort of a general inbox that folks can email us. But yeah, check us out online. We've even done like open houses at City Hall, just or office hours where we were just there. If you're just coming to pay your water bill, and you might see us and can stop by and ask questions.
That's great. Kyle, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciated hearing more, learning more about what you're doing. And it's remarkable to hear about everything that Norfolk is pioneering.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks so much for having me.
In previous episodes of Economic Architecture, we've talked about the cornerstone of our work, which really focuses on identifying structural innovations and the innovators behind them. Kyle's work is a great example of an innovation with the potential to mitigate climate-related damage. But interestingly, it doesn't require an entire change to the market structures. Instead, they're innovating in other key ways. First of all, they're not waiting for a catastrophe to put these changes in place. They know the potential for damage, and they've designed solutions around it. Solutions that will hopefully be implemented long before the damage itself takes place, with an eye towards the future by preventing damage to coastal communities today. Second, they know the potential for damage, and they've designed solutions around it. They know that implementing these solutions is going to take time. So they're also focused today on creating a living laboratory that can identify innovations that can have an immediate impact. Things like working with the GPS app Waze to help residents avoid flooding that's occurring now. They're talking about camera scoping in the sewage pipes so they can get a sense of how to reduce the risk from backflooding into people's homes from high tides. They are actively advancing innovations that can have an impact on people immediately. Norfolk is an incredible example of fostering innovations today while they're waiting for large-scale solutions to come online. And once the large-scale solutions that we're working on today come online, that will create a window of opportunity to address the fundamental issues, like how, when, and where can we intentionally and equitably think about moving the city so it remains viable and vibrant 100 years from now. The last key point for me is something that Shalini Vachala brought up in an episode earlier this year. She talked about the fact that bringing large-scale solutions to create climate resilience often requires a relay race to be successful. What's happening now in Norfolk is a great example of exactly that kind of relay race. As Kyle mentioned, all this really started with a decision that was made at the federal level when HUD was responding to Hurricane Sandy in 2012. The funding pool that was created at this federal level was then mobilized at the state level in Virginia. Now we have the City of Norfolk, one city working with other cities, towns, and communities around them to bring the innovations to fruition. The more we see innovations like these in Norfolk and how they come to fruition, the more we can recognize them. And collectively, we can learn how to create the large-scale change we all need to address a changing climate. I'm Stuart Yasgur, and this is Economic Architecture, the podcast.